Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2023 GMC Canyon, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster automatic battery disconnect switch. Before we get into that though, let's just take a minute, we'll check this out and see what it actually does. So with these Canyons, GM wants you to disconnect the battery whenever you're flat towing it down the road. And honestly, you know, for someone like me, I hear that and I would think, not a huge deal, right? I'll disconnect it every time, but I could see that getting old pretty quick. You know, when you're out trying to enjoy yourself and hang out and have fun and stuff, the last thing you want to do is have to pop the hood, get your tools out, mess around, you know, disconnect and everything. And the same goes for when you're ready to, you know, actually disconnect from your coach and drive your truck around. You don't want to have to mess with this, right? What the disconnect switch is going to do, once it's installed, it will eliminate you from having to go through that whole process, and all you're going to have to do is push a button. Here's what that button can look like inside of your truck, and it's small, you know, it doesn't look out of place, it's not some big ugly switch taking up a bunch of room, and the way they make it too, you know, you're not accidentally going to bump into it and disconnect your battery when you're driving. So as far as the appearance goes, you can't get much better, but you know, this kit really isn't about that. It's about the convenience, right? So right now we have power to our truck like we normally would. Got our dome light on, horn works, everything has power. But when we're ready to flat tow, you push that button, no more lights, horn don't work, you know, it kills power to everything, just how GMC wants it. And then when you're ready to, you know, disconnect, drive your truck around town, you'll just push the button again to power everything back up. Now I'm just going to give this a few more seconds. It's kind of good practice. With these late model vehicles, you don't want to, you know, kill power, turn it back on rapidly like that, because there's so many computers in here. You want to give them a second to kind of do their thing and reset and go through all that stuff. But, you know, after a few seconds, we'll push the button again. Let the computer kind of wake up. We have our lights back, horn works, and everything would have power like it normally would. The way it's going to work is really straightforward. It's just a solenoid here that's going to interrupt the flow of electricity. So you'll have, you know, one of your cables hooked up to the positive battery post, and then the other cable you'll hook up to the factory cable that was going to your positive battery post. And so when everything's on, that power flows through to your factory cable, just as if it were hooked up directly to the battery. But when you push that button to disconnect everything, that solenoid will activate, interrupt the flow there, prevent electricity from going through here and into the vehicle. So, you know, pretty tried and true concept. This type of thing has been around for a long time, and they work, you know. As far as the quality goes, Roadmaster makes really nice components. The wiring's really thick. Everything's put together well. You know, they give you a lot of extras, wire loom and stuff like that to make the installation process a little bit easier and give you a cleaner install look for that matter. Speaking of the installation though, really not too bad. It is a little time consuming. You know, you'll have to modify your battery post a little bit, but you know, it's pretty straightforward, especially for me. You know, my thought is spend a little bit of time doing this once, get it set up, and that's going to save you a ton of time in the future whenever you're ready to flat tow, not having to bother with all this every single time. You know, if this is something that you're just not comfortable dealing with, electrical stuff, or don't have the time or place to work on it, definitely understand that. You can always use our dealer locator network, and hopefully that'll get you going in the right direction as far as finding a shop that can help you out and maybe do this for you. But if you're going to tackle it yourself, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation for our battery disconnect, we're going to be working underneath the hood over here on the passenger side by our battery. First and foremost, you need to find a spot to mount up the solenoid. And I chose to use the self-tapping screws that are provided to secure it to the firewall here. You know, you just want to make sure that it's pointed in the right direction, so down, how we have it set up here. And you need to make sure that your cables are going to be able to reach your battery post. So this is a really convenient spot. I have on other Canyons where this bracket and stuff wasn't here, we have these two studs. I have used those before. But like I said, since we have all this stuff here, wasn't able to do that. So we ended up running it right to the firewall. What we can focus on now is this white wire coming off of our solenoid. That's going to be a ground. And I'm just going to utilize one of these studs for our ground. So I'm going to cut our wire to length. And strip the insulation back. And this is how we're going to make connections, you know, as far as a ring terminal goes or butt connector. You just twist the wire tight. Take the ring terminal and crimp it down just like that. I'm going to come in with a 10 millimeter and remove that nut. And the kit does come with a self-tapping screw. You can always secure it to a clean piece of sheet metal or something if you don't want to do this, or don't have this bracket here, whatever the case may be. What I think what I'm going to do is probably come in with a little sandpaper or something and just kind of remove some of this paint on the bracket and the nut. That way we can ensure that we get a good clean ground. With some of that paint removed, ensure that we get a good ground. I'll slide that over. Cleaned off the back side of the nut as well. We'll just put everything back in place and tighten this on down. You have a fuse holder that comes off of the solenoid, and you want to make sure that the fuse is not installed in it just yet before we hook up our thick battery cables. So ultimately, once everything's hooked up and complete, we'll come back, put the fuse in at the very end. Moving to your positive battery terminal, you know, there's some covers and stuff on it. Just pop them out of the way. And if you happen to have anything, you know, any other accessories hooked to power, be sure to pull those fuses first. But we're going to remove these two nuts here. So this one is a 13 millimeter. Just while you're pulling that off, be careful not to touch metal, if yours happens to have that. And then with this one, you can switch out to a 10 millimeter. These off, and then we can remove the terminal from the post. What we're able to do now, if you take your terminal, we can make a cut in between these two posts, right, and separate them. That way we're able to hook our battery post cable up to the post and our battery cable up to this post here. So I like to use a multi-tool to do this, but you can use a Dremel or whatever you got here. On the cable side, You have this red cover on it. I cut that off to get it out of the way. And what we can do here, if you take the big cable coming from your solenoid, you're going to want to deal with the one that's labeled battery cable. And a word of advice too, even though they're labeled, check the diagram and the instructions just in case if the stickers got misplaced or something like that. It's always good practice to do. But on this battery cable side, they give you this heat shrink. Go ahead and put that heat shrink over it. And then, just kind of getting untangled here. What we're able to do is take this, and in the kit they're going to give you a star washer. You can put that on. Put the battery cable over that post. We'll take another star washer, put that on, and then we can take the factory nut and reinstall that. Actually here, since we had this hooked up, this little fuse, I'll put that on too. Then we can take our factory nut and tighten it down. Make sure it's snug. And with this piece on there now, don't have a ton of room, but what we'll do is still take our heat shrink here. We'll put it on as far as we can get it. We can seal it up. So you just come back with the heat gun and shrink it down. I did come back and use some electrical tape, tape this up really well since the heat shrink didn't really cover it all that great. And then you can take the other part of the terminal, put that over the post, get the cable labeled battery post, slide that on. Got my other fuse holders here. Just kind of trying to find the best angle for this to fit here. Put the nut back on. And something that I've noticed, kind of how this terminal works, when you tighten it, it forces the two ends together. But once you put all this stuff on here, it don't really want to do that. And so something you can do is take a pair of pliers or something, just kind of squeeze it together like that. I'm just squeezing that in together to make it tight, and then tighten the nut down. So if you're having issues, you tighten it down and the terminal is still loose on the post, this is something you can try to correct that issue. What I did now, that red cover that we had cut off, I just zip tied that back over this deal here. Just for some extra protection. It's pretty close to metal and everything, so rather have it than the other way around. And then this little cover, put that on, and that will keep all of this area protected here. I'll come back and kind of just start to clean up some of our wiring and get it secured. I got all this secured and took the included wire loom, put it over the wires to clean up the look a little bit and help keep it protected. And then we can focus on this gray wire coming out of the solenoid. This is going to have to get routed to inside of the cab. So I just have it loosely routed now. We'll come back and secure it and everything later, but just runs along through here over to the driver's side where we have it running through a grommet. Here's where the wire goes through, and chances are pretty good if you're at this point, you probably already have a grommet or something set up for a lot of your other components, but if not, you can just carefully drill a hole into the firewall, pop a grommet in there and pass the wire through. Inside of the truck, this is where our wiring comes out, and we already had the dash partly removed here from installing some of our other flat towing components, and you don't absolutely have to remove these panels if you don't want to. It does make it easier though. If you're wanting to remove them, this side piece, it literally just snaps out of place. You get in there, pry it out, and then this bottom piece, very similar, that'll be pushed in there. You'll have a 7mm head screw here, and then a couple of them on the bottom. This just pops out of position here. So what we can do is find a spot to mount up our push button and kind of get our wires prepped. If you pull some of this gray sheathing back, that'll expose 2 wires. And you can grab your pigtail, which is this here, and connect the pigtail to the 2 wires. And so I usually include buck connectors. Got the yellow wire from the pigtail connected to the red wire here, and I got the blue pigtail wire connected to the black wire. We need to figure out a spot to mount up our switch, and so what I've done, I looked at our dash panel, and in this area here, it's wide open. And makes sense to put it there because it's next to some of our other controls like our brake controller there, and behind the panel where this is, there's nothing really behind it either. I did just do another Canyon that didn't have the factory brake controller, and I was still able to put it in a very similar spot. I might have put it up a little bit higher, but so that can be done as well. But you just want to drill out the opening just large enough to fit this through. I believe comes out to be about 5/8 or something like that. But I like to use a step bit, that way I can run it through and kind of check it every now and again. We'll push that through, and where it comes out the back, you can take the nut and run it down. And you don't have to get carried away here. I usually just get it about as tight as I can by hand, and that'll be sufficient. The pigtail is just going to plug into the back of the switch. So we'll lock that in, and before I put all this stuff back together and everything, I want to test it. So what I'll do, I'll go back under the hood, put the included fuse into that holder, and go from there. Got the fuse in, and our truck has power. You know, our dash is lightly lit up, our dome lights are on. You know, if I hit the horn, that works. So now if I push this button, it should kill all that power. As soon as I do it, our dome lights went off, the dash isn't illuminated, horn doesn't work, anything like that. And I'm just gonna give this 30 seconds or a minute before I power it back on. With these late model cars, you know, you don't wanna do things too fast. You know, let the computer kind of do its thing. So we'll let a little time pass. We're ready to test it out now. Make sure it turns everything back on. So we'll push a button. Give it a second here. Our dome light came back on. Our dash is lightly illuminated. Hit the horn, that works. And so I think it's safe to say everything is working properly. So since we verified that, I'll go ahead, kind of get all of our panels put back in place and tidy up all of our wiring. Now that everything checked out good, that will do it for our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster automatic battery disconnect switch on our 2023 GMC Canyon.